You can reference data in very particular ways, but if you're writing to a general public, you have to find ways to make that data into a story. Seeing what students will try to do that's new and expansive for their own abilities, their own skills. I think that's really important. So that it's not just a dry scientific report and it's not just sort of imaginative out there, but the combination of those two is an emerging genre.
Hey guys, welcome to our newest interview episode. Today we have Dr. Scott Sorrell, and he's currently a professor here at Cornell teaching Sorrell writing courses, and also took one of his courses. It's absolutely one of my favorite courses here at Cornell. And for those who don't know you, Doctor, do you mind introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. So my name is Scott Sorrell. I am in the Knight Institute at Cornell. So we not only teach writing classes, but we also are in charge of training other people across the university for all of the writing that goes on at Cornell. And my background is in anthropology, and I just became more interested in climate issues and environmental issues over the past few years, and I've had the chance to get to teach those classes, so that's been really fun.
Perfect. Yeah, it's a pleasure for us to have you today. And also, by the way, I'm David.
I'm Victor.
Awesome. So one of the first questions we have for you today is that, as you said, knowing you have some academic backgrounds in anthropology and global cultural exchange, when did you begin your journey to sustainability and climate change?
So I did my PhD research in South India, in Bangalore, and I looked at the effects that urbanization, like rapid urbanization, has had on various communities there, especially marginalized communities. In the course of that, a few things happened in that year. One, I noticed where I live, they had to keep drilling deeper and deeper boreholes in order for us to have water. And the lakes in the city caught on fire while I was there. And they couldn't be put out because there's so many chemicals that were going into these lakes that they just kept burning. And I remember among friends of mine, there was a lot of discussion of whether or not the city was at risk of a kind of environmental collapse, even as it kept growing, and it's known as the Silicon Valley of India. It's got all these tech startups, and it's just this really vibrant young culture. But then there was all this concern about the environment. And so I started thinking, how can I really look at how people have equitable access to the city if I don't think about the environmental issues that everyone has to deal with? And that led me really to think more seriously and closely about climate change.
Right.
Very nice. So now that you're here at Cornell, of course, teaching some of these classes, can you talk to us a little bit about what key writing skills you want your students to develop in relation to environmental climate change and the writing related to that?
Yeah. I mean, what I would say is that climate change writing, for a lot of students, really, they think of it first and foremost as scientific reports or presenting scientific data. And that is a big and important part of communicating about climate change. But if it were just scientific reports, only a really small section of people would ever read them, right? Yeah. So one of the things that I really focus on, and I know David could talk about this, is talking about audience again and again. Who is your audience? If your audience are other experts, then you can write in a certain way. You can use jargon. You can reference data in very particular ways. But if you're writing to a general public, you have to find ways to make that data into a story, to give it a compelling narrative that's going to bring people in and help them see why it's important and why they want to care about these issues, that they actually are relevant to their lives. So one of the things I really focus on with students is how to think more about the audience and how attention to and awareness of your audience shapes the kind of writing you're doing, and how you're using information, not just presenting it, but really presenting it in a thoughtful way. And so that's something that runs across all the classes that I teach.
Absolutely. Victor, you know me, I'm a big speaker. Like I give public
That's right.
speeches.
That's right.
And I just remember like in Dr. Sorrell's class,
Yeah.
like I always thought environmental writing is about data and science, but like the first class he taught, I remember he was like, like there should be enough data, but you need to incorporate a lot of speaking skills. I was like, that's when I know that's the right class I took.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. I think I totally agree with that. I have another question for you actually. Like, what is in your opinion the role the writers can play in terms of, combating climate change and, all the sort of different medias? What is writing? What is special about writing?
I think that writing is both everywhere in today's world and also increasingly, right, like we receive so much information in videos and sound bites, and so there's not a lot of space for nuance if you're watching like a reel or you're it's a tweet or whatever we call them now.
Yeah.
But it's necessarily very short, and writing can allow you to expand and explore the complexity without having to just make one point. You can have that subtlety and that nuance, and I think that's an important and necessary part of communicating any issue, especially an issue that affects everyone, in ways that some are obvious and some are not so obvious, and so being able to tease that out, to explore that, and to write in ways that bring people in, that make them like want to know what is the solution, or what's going to happen next, or if it's a story, like what's going to happen to these characters, and how that curiosity that like keeps you reading might also keep you thinking and coming up with new ideas, new possibilities.
Absolutely, yeah.
So along similar lines, I guess, since writing can be quite subjective, especially about this topic, how would you say you measure the success of your students in these classes, in their writing?
I mean, with all the students that I teach, one of the things that I really look for in terms of measuring success is growth, like how they've pushed themselves and tried something new, right? You can come in and already know like so many things, but can you techniques or rhetorical techniques or how to cite sources or to integrate data, but can you push that and see if you can make that more of a narrative? Or maybe you're somebody who is really good at narrative and creative work, but you're kind of scared of integrating data because that feels difficult, right? Are you willing to try and do that? So seeing what students will try to do that's new and expansive for their own abilities, their own skills, I think that's really important, right? So it's different for different people. It's not like a one-size-fits-all answer. And I think that it's really about that greater awareness of why am I writing this? What is the goal? What is the reason? Who's the audience? Because maybe writing is not the best medium for every issue and every method. Maybe it is more visual, or maybe it's something multimedia. But being able to understand that and have the writing as one of the tools among many means that you can use it when it is the most effective one. Right? And so a greater understanding of what's going to be effective and when are these skills going to be the best, so that you can use them to the best advantage.
Absolutely. Since you are also a writing professor, a writing seminar professor, we are just wondering, what do you think in the future that some specific type of writing or some specific genre will become the predominant genre in terms of climate change writing and writing as a whole?
I mean, part of me thinks like, who knows, right? Like who knows what's going to happen? But at the same time, I think we've seen over the past like decade or so a real emergence of a kind of new nature writing and environmental writing that is combining scientific research with personal memoir, stories, nonfiction, but in this more lyrical or poetic way, and that people are really enjoying reading at that intersection, so that it's not just a dry scientific report and it's not just sort of imaginative out there, but the combination of those two is an emerging genre. And it makes me think of a book, actually have it right here, on Time and Water by this Icelandic author, Andri Snær Magnusson. And he writes about the receding glaciers in Iceland. And he talks about how his grandparents had this particular relationship. They went on their honeymoon to measure the glacier. And then he talks about how he's gone to that glacier, but it's retreated, but he sees it. And then he thinks about how his grandchildren will go to that same place, but maybe there won't be any ice left there. But they'll still love that landscape because they grew to know it in their own time. And I think I really like that book for a lot of reasons, but I think that he really pays attention to the way that we each form this relationship to the world around us that's grounded in our own experience and our own sense of wonder at this place that we get to call our home. And so the writing might change over time, but that orientation to respect for our relationship with the world, it might look different for different generations, but I think continuing to write about that also shows what's connected. So the landscape might change, but that sense of connection is still there. And I think that whatever that writing looks like in the future, which is yet to be seen, who knows, it will continue to be about that relationship. And I think that that's the important part.
Absolutely, yeah.
So wrapping this up, connecting it back to our organization, obviously Planet Number 2, I'm sure David's told you a lot about that. One of our main goals is to raise awareness for younger generations, to call for action relating this issue. So given that, what advice would you have for us and for coming generations who will obviously play a very important role in this? What advice do you have for them sort of going forward?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to my mind is this often told story about Bill McKibben, who is a well-known climate activist and writer. And whenever anybody asks him, what's the number one thing that I can do as an individual to address climate change, he says, stop being an individual. Go find a community. Join a group of people. Act collectively, right? Because I can think about how many reusable bags I take to the store, or drive a electric car, or these small efficiencies, and they're important. We all have to do our part in that way, right? But if we only think about it as something we do as individuals, then really thinking about how we change that relationship at a community level, at a global level, to respect for the earth that literally sustains us, that is where I think the real change happens. And so being part of a community, being part of an organization like yours, right, being connected to other people who have those interests, that is what's going to sustain us over the long term. Because if you're by yourself, even if you're committed to these principles, you get exhausted, you get tired, it can feel impossible sometimes. But if you have other people who are also invested in those ideas and trying to figure those things out, then that keeps everybody going. So I think finding those communities is really important, both in the short term and in the long term.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Yeah, that's some great answers, no? Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I firmly believe that all of our audience, teenagers and other people will definitely absorb a lot of experience from your journey, and I hope everyone can get involved in this exciting mission of ours. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.